Hi everyone, and welcome to the Fake Love and Flying Monkeys podcast. My name's Nova Gibson and I am your host. My area of expertise is in supporting victims and survivors of narcissistic abuse and other toxic relationships. I'm the principal counsellor at Brighter Outlook Narcissistic Abuse Counselling Service, and I'm also the author of Fake Love, Understanding and Healing from Narcissistic Abuse. In this podcast, we're going to be talking about everything from the initial pink cloud you find yourself on at the start through to the horrific discard and the powerful trauma bond that keeps you hooked. So take your imaginary seat on the roller coaster that is narcissistic abuse, and don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode of Fake Love and Flying Monkeys. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fake Love and Flying Monkeys. Narcissistic videos, narcissistic abuse videos, covert narcissists, overt narcissists, how to heal from narcissists, how to recognize the signs that you're dealing with a narcissist. These videos, podcasts, reels, TikToks, they're everywhere. Why the sudden explosion? Why is everyone wanting to know about narcissists? Why is everyone suddenly talking about it? Well, number one, it's a good thing. And number two, I believe that people are starting to talk about it more. Why? Because they realize that they're not alone. Originally, people were turning to online support groups. They were getting together online. They were looking at videos and clips and reading blogs and things like that, but still not getting a sense that there were so many people just like them out there. Or they go through this type of abuse, as many people do, not realizing that they're being abused because they had their boundaries managed down over time. They'd started to normalize the abuse and minimize it and just take it for granted that that's the way their relationship was. And every relationship had its ups and downs. In other words, they were coming up with survival techniques, coping mechanisms to get through and survive this type of abuse. So if many people don't realize, especially, in years gone by, when we had those stereotypical notions of what a family looked like and who the head of the family was. And I mean, we're really going back now to, the 50s and the 60s. But you think about it, only in the 70s, I think, in Australia, divorce was legal. You had to virtually get permission to get a divorce. So I know that sounds like I'm rambling on, but the point I'm getting at is that all of this abuse, because of what happened in years gone by and the dynamics of past decades, the abuse truly remained behind closed doors. So I believe that narcissism has always been a thing. Narcissists have been around for a long, long time. This is supported by the fact, I guess, that Sigmund Freud coined the term after the Greek mythology god who saw his reflection in a river and fell in love with it. That's where the term comes from. But they've been around for a long time. I believe that the reason it wasn't this huge thing in decades gone by is because of the abuse taking place behind closed doors, the normalization of the stronger, more powerful person in the relationship, typically the man in years gone by, would be expected to kind of rule over the family. And that's not me being a feminist. That's just the way things were in years gone by. It doesn't mean there was abuse taking place. It's just that means that the stereotypical notions, the expectations in society, what were that the man was seen as the provider, the stronger, more powerful person, and the woman, the hunter-gatherer nurturer, was the person who typically stayed home and looked after the children. So when you've got those roles and there's no connection with the outside world, if there is abuse taking place, then you really are not going to have anything to compare it to, which means you're going to come up with even more effective strategies to survive the abuse, which means minimizing the abuse and normalizing it. So we know that NPD is a shame-based disorder, and the research on exactly how someone becomes a narcissist is out. Much research links in environmental influences such as previous trauma, overindulgence, with things like genetics and having that genetic predisposition. But it's really, really hard to get accurate statistics when you can't get the subjects to put their hand up and be part of that research because they simply don't think there's anything wrong with themselves. But getting back to the disorder, if Sigmund Freud coined that term all those years ago, what that suggests to me is that it's always been there, but we are just becoming more aware of it now. Why is that? So NPD, narcissism, has clearly been around for a long time. If Sigmund Freud coined the term, then we know there have been narcissists around forever, or at least for the last century. So why is it only now that we're really starting to become aware of it, there's just this explosion out there of awareness, which is only increasing every day? Why are people starting to talk about this? Well, I touched earlier on the difference in families and relationships in the last century, particularly in the middle of the last century, where those abusive behaviors would have been kind of absorbed into the family as being normal, and there would have been little support or communication with the outside world for a victim to compare his or her abuse, which they of course wouldn't have been able to define as this type of psychological abuse. It would have meant that they couldn't talk about it. They had no one to talk to it about, but they also didn't know that what they were experiencing was abuse. If they had a roof over their head, they had food on the table, then everything in between was just something that was part and parcel of a relationship having its ups and downs. Can you imagine how hard it must have been for our parents and our grandparents who may have been in a relationship with a narcissist, and all the coping mechanisms they would have had to have come up with, many of which would have involved blaming themselves for the abuse and taking Valium, which was, the go last century, and just having to survive this abuse where their abuser was making them feel crazy intentionally. If we look at where the term gaslighting comes from, That term comes from the movie Gaslighting, which was made. There's actually two movies called Gaslighting, guys. If you're going to see it, make sure you get the Ingrid Bergman version. Watch that one. It's amazing. But that movie was made in, I don't know, I think the 1940s. So that just goes to show that gaslighting has always been a thing where that narcissistic individual will use those techniques to distort their victims' perceptions and make them feel crazy. Can you imagine how many people in the last century, in decades gone by, who had that electric convulsive therapy? Guys, correct me if I said that wrong. You know what I'm talking about, where they put the electricity, those probes on their head, and they jolt them with electricity if they had depression, anxiety, and things like that. Can you imagine all the people who were locked up in institutions because they literally felt like they were crazy and they could not explain what was happening to them? That's what happened. I hate to ruin the ending for you. No, in actual fact, I won't. Watch Gaslighting, and I gave you a little bit of a hint there, but it is an eye-opener as to the end result when a victim truly is made to believe they are crazy by the actual crazy person. And, even going back further than that, where, in centuries gone by, I think the start of the last century, where people were having, lobotomies and things like that. Can you imagine how many people were subjected to these kinds of treatments because there was no one that understood what they were going through, and they actually felt crazy themselves? So now we get closer to why it's all of a sudden, it's really not all of a sudden, but it appears to be that people are starting to talk about it, and we're noticing it, and people are finding support, and they're realizing that when they have their light bulb moment, this is a thing. This wasn't their fault. It doesn't mean they haven't got this huge healing journey in front of them because of their trauma, but there is more awareness out there, and with more awareness comes more support. But let's look at the changes that occurred in society that would have made this information more available to victims. Well, I guess the most obvious conclusion to draw from that would be the rise of social media and that global interconnectedness that means we can connect with people on the other side of the world. We can read what they write. We can watch their videos. So the rise in social media and just that technology has made it possible for victims who weren't able to get support, often didn't know they needed support in terms of being abused because they thought there was something wrong with themselves. They would have been more likely to have been going to a doctor and been diagnosed with hysteria or bipolar or borderline personality disorder, all of these things that victims get diagnosed as, when in actual fact their environment is causing all of those symptoms. Their abusive environment and their domestic violence victims. But they have this support now where they can connect with other victims, and it's taken many years for this to become this awareness out there, which is still not where it needs to be. But in comparison to 10 years ago, it is an explosion. It's prolific, and we need to keep going. Now, of course, social media plays a huge part in victims finding validation online, reading about other people's experiences, and watching videos on how to heal, and I guess looking at how it wasn't their fault. But I also think there's other factors that impact on not only the rise of support for victims, but also the rise in narcissism. So while these are just my thoughts, please know that it stands to reason, as far as I'm concerned, that narcissism could only increase in the last few decades. Why? Because of the sense of entitlement that many people now have, whether that's because that's what their parents role modeled to them, that's how they were raised, and of course that's the values and the traits that they viewed and they absorbed, but also because of other things occurring in society, such as the ability for someone to go into court and just sue anybody. People are sue happy. You look at them the wrong way and they will take you to court and sue you. And who has the most stamina, the most power, the most resources to sue someone in court? Well, the narcissist, the one who has made all their money, not always, but someone who's going to be sue happy is also going to enjoy dominating people and having that power. And of course, with power comes money, and not only being able to take people to court at the whim, that a drop of a hat, but also the fact that there's no consequences for actions. Once upon a time in the schoolyard, and I am not condoning this by any stretch of the means, but back then in past decades, whilst the abuse was also hidden, the consequences for someone doing the wrong thing by you were sorted out in the backyard if you were a couple of brothers. And while this is not ideal and it's not condone violence, I never condone it, I'm simply pointing to the fact that these were strategies that people employed in years gone by. Now they subpoena someone because they looked at them sideways, and they can ruin a person's life by dragging them into court simply because they had their ego wounded. Now, all of these systems where we seem to want to protect the perpetrator all the time. Yes, it must be that someone is innocent until proven guilty, but we also need to make it a level playing field for a victim and a perpetrator, and we also need to make it so that power hungry people, and if someone just slips over and trips over walking down the street, can't go and sue someone for $1 million. This is what society is like now, and it means that narcissists are going to be born and bred, because it boils down to that chicken and egg thing. People are going to take advantage, I should say, of those systems where we just allow someone to walk into court and because they, kick their toe on the sidewalk, and I really am minimizing that, I know. I'm just trying to get a point across as to how crazy our system has gotten, because it's only the powerful people that win in the end and are able to, get away with it. We're really supporting them by having no consequences for actions. Young people can breach an order, or get bail after bail after bail after bail, and of course they're going to do it again. There's no deterrent, but there's also no education or support systems for those people to make it less likely that they will offend in the beginning. There are so many factors that impact on the rise of narcissism in our society. But I think if we really look at it from a point of view of punishment and reward and role modeling, we can really kind of look at the three main elements as to why this is happening. Because the rich, powerful people are rewarded, and of course they dominate people. They feel justified to do that, and then they raise their own children and they role model those behaviors, and their children absorb those traits of their parents, and they're being rewarded for taking. They feel entitled to take. They'll justify taking, and they're rewarded for having no empathy. So yes, whilst there seems to be this absolute proliferation of information out there on narcissistic abuse, on narcissism, NPD, some of it good, some of it not so good, some of it amazing, victims talking from their experience. In the end, I think it's wonderful. I think that it's a good thing that there is so much information out there, so that victims aren't feeling alone, and they're starting to realize that this was not their fault. People aren't in the numbers that they were. It certainly does happen for people who don't get the right support, but people aren't, spending years in hospital, in institutions, because they're being made to believe that they're crazy by their abuser. This does still happen. Absolutely it happens, but it's slowly starting to change, and the information out there means that there is becoming more awareness. So guys, I think it just boils down to the fact that, like anything, if you go on social media, you've got to trust your instincts, and you've also got to trust your brain in, I guess, understanding that there is going to be information out there that is not correct. It's not good. And there are going to be, information, videos out there with people who put, their own spin on it. Don't ever forget that, I'm sure you won't, but narcissists project and they sabotage. And narcissists, once they're aware that people may be talking about them, or they've been told they're a narcissist, and they think they can cash in on talking about this as a victim, because they know all about it, they know what their victim's going to say. There are going to be many narcissists out there. You think about it. what would be the most, I don't know, the most rewarding place to find victims whom you could express empathy with, because it all happened to you too. The best place to find victims is in a narcissistic abuse recovery support group online. So yeah, just a word of advice, guys. Be careful. Trust your instincts. I mean, the internet is the internet, and you know, it's all it's the information out there is only as good as your instincts tell you. And sometimes you have to take a lot of the time you have to take what you read, what you hear, with a grain of salt. But I think the most important thing is that, because there are so many podcasts and Facebook pages and TikTok channels, etc., out there, that when you start to compare the information and the stories, you can see very clear connections and similarities in those stories. And then you can pick out the bits you want, and you can start to connect the dots. And of course, you know, read books from authors that you trust, like myself. Please don't forget, guys, to get your copy of my best-selling book, Fake Love, Understanding and Healing from Narcissistic Abuse, available worldwide by HarperCollins. Also available in Audible and Kindle. And of course, if you'd like to have a one-on-one session with me, I counsel people all over the world via Zoom. So just see my website link in the description. But just in ending, guys, it's really important to be aware that just because you're reading something or listening to something, and you know, someone's saying that they're right, it's, you've got to trust your instincts. And that's not me putting anyone down, because I do the same thing. I love it that there's so much information out there, and I love watching people's TikToks and reading their blogs, etc. But you know, I do my due diligence, and I take what I need, and I kind of go, yeah, I don't know about that. But yeah, there is a lot of information out there, which is a good thing. But you've got to do now what the narcissist taught you or conditioned you not to do, and that's to trust your instincts. And that brings us to the end of another Fake Love and Flying Monkeys episode. Hope you enjoyed that, guys. I think it's interesting to kind of, you know, go back in history a little bit to find out why it is where we are today in terms of awareness around narcissistic abuse. And I'd like to do some more videos on this, especially with some guests in the future. So yes, don't forget, guys, if you'd like to support the channel, which I would be so grateful for. They do take a lot of time to make. I would love it if you could leave a rating and review. It certainly helps with the algorithm to put it out there. And of course, tag your friends, share, guys. That's the best thing you can do to keep this podcast going. And don't forget to follow me on my other social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and where else am I? LinkedIn. And on that note, guys, it's bye from me for now. Until the next episode, remember, you are worthy of love, and you are worthy of so much more than a lifetime of fake love and flying monkeys.